Does anyone actually know who the Visigoths are? I'm honestly asking this. I've heard all about them, but I don't actually know anything about them. Today, we will be explaining the history of the Visigoths, their origins, and most importantly, how they connect to the edgy, dark 14-year-olds on Tumblr who are oh so memeable. However, to explain the Visigoths, I need to give some context. Before the Visigoths came the Goths. The Goths were a group of the Germanic peoples, aka those who speak Germanic languages, an example of which is English. Now here's the problem. We know jack shit on the Goths' location in history. The most common theory is that they originated in Scandinavia, but there is little evidence to actually back it up, besides some archaeological artifacts that aren't that helpful considering how much the Goths moved around. However, because it's the best thing that we've got, let's just roll with it. Basically, from there, the Goths seem to have migrated to mainland Europe at around the early 1st century CE, a decision which I'm surprised they took, because that seems far too basic for them. Some evidence of this is a settlement in Poland, which had some proof of housing Goths, but there's also proof that many nomadic tribes stayed there, but whatever, let's just roll with it again. Anyways, at this point of time, the Goths have finally made contact with the Romans, which would basically dictate most of their later history before they separate into the two groups of the Ostrogoths and Visigoths. The Romans called them Scythians and absolutely hated them. They were mostly seen as pests, but eventually the Gothic ruler Cniva led a successful attack against the Romans, allowing for them finally to be seen as a credible threat. This is why the Goths are considered edgy and dark, by the way. In the 19th century, they were discovered and the Victorians thought, egad, such rebels! They must be miscreants who go against society, in typical Victorian fashion. And so they got the reputation as dark rebels which we now know and semi-love. So our newfound protagonist Cniva has finally put the Goths on the map. However, he did one more act to really piss off the Roman Empire, as it was so mainstream that it contradicted everything that the leader of our beloved Indie Empire stood for. He led the Battle of Abridus, where he not only demolished the Roman opposing forces, but also killed the emperor, that being Emperor Decius and his son Herennius, which is the literal definition of overkill. Afterwards, the new emperor struck a deal with Cniva, that being that the Roman Empire would let them leave with all their spoils, and also pay them tribute, in return of Cniva never attacking them again, which is a massive loophole in it that the Goths exploited the hell out of. However, 5 years later, the Goths attacked again, shocker who could have seen that coming, and managed to kill a semi-important emperor, Claudius, allowing for a more important emperor, Aurelius, to take the throne. This attack, while being successful, turned out to be the biggest mistake of the Goths, while they were on a unified front, something that didn't happen often. Now at this point in history, Rome had, let's say, questionable rulers, from Claudius, who was basically incompetent, to Caligula, who was a hot mess. From those flaming piles, we had a glimmer of hope, the last remaining pillar of semi-decent rulers who didn't participate in incest, Aurelius. Aurelius was known amongst the Romans to be a great fighter and an amazing military planner. In 271 AC, he launched an attack against the Goths, murdering scores of e-boys and killing the leaders of the Goths, Abridus. He then proceeded to banish the Goths across the Danube River and relinquished the Roman land previously lost due to the Goths. After that, there were around 100 years of more fights. Some Roman empires tried moving on to Gothic lands, taking said Gothic land away, and leaving the Goths to furiously post on Tumblr about it. Then a major event occurred, the Gothic Wars of 376 to 382. So this entire time, the Goths were basically being subjugated by the Romans, being forced to not gain any of their land back, and were shunned to the outer parts of mainland Europe. So it's safe to say that the Goths were pretty pissed at their current position in the world. This culminated in the Battle of Adrianople, where the Goths, alongside some other nomadic tribes like the Alans and Thracians, rose up against the Norman Roman Empire and actually won, something nobody expected. They pulled off this unlikely victory due to the fact that there were already some problems within the Roman Empire, specifically an emperor whose power's eyes were a little too big for their power's stomach. Then they tried taking over Constantinople, causing the big boy emperors to try to resolve that issue, leaving the Goths conveniently unsupervised, I guess. After months of bloodshed, Goths losing several valiant e-boys and Romans losing troops, the Goths finally managed to quote-unquote win the respect of the Roman Empire, and become a small unofficial part of it, eventually causing them to become more and more Roman in nature. Then we get to the big split. Basically, the Huns, you may have heard of them, kind of a big deal, consistently tried to attack the Goths, and therefore two groups emerged. The Tervingi, also known as the Visigoths, who enlisted themselves to the Roman Empire for safety, and the other half, the Greatungi/Ostrogoths, who had to fight the Huns, and the big difference between these two eventually caused for them to split. But that's for another video. See you in like 2 months.